Just so everybody is aware, we're hoping if, for those of you that have gotten access to your TreePlotter accounts, if you want to, you can pull up and log on another screen or another device, and then you'll be able to kind of follow along with us as we show you how to do various things. Could be handy if you're not all set up with that yet, that's okay too. We'll get there. Okay, so I think most people are here, so we might as well get started. So again, thanks everybody for coming on here today. We're really excited to share this program with you. Let me go ahead and share my screen. That look. Everybody see that? Great. Okay, so this is the kind of basic training for our new tree inventory program. My name is Alex Binck. I'm with California ReLeaf. I am going to be working on helping you guys use the TreePlotter inventory software. I've been setting up everything in the background, and I'll also be here if you guys have any questions whatsoever about how to use it. And I'm also joined by Maggie DeLauter with PlanIt Geo. PlanIt Geo is the company that designed TreePlotter, and she's going to be helping teach us all some things about how to use it. Okay, so I'm going to briefly go over the agenda today. We will just kind of quickly touch on the basics of our program and why we're doing what we're doing. Then Maggie's going to take over with how to use some of the core features of TreePlotter. We'll do a brief Q&A after that, and then we're going to switch over to how to use some of the different things that we've kind of customized in ways that we hope will make it easier for you guys to do what you need to do with your specific programs. And then after that, we'll have more time for question and answer on that. So, all right. So the first thing I want to cover, which this is something that some of you may know, some of you it might be something new, but I just wanted to define what a tree inventory actually is for those of you who may not know. So a tree inventory is basically just a collection of information or data about a group of trees that you want to keep track of, usually something that you're tracking kind of over time, so that you can return and see how they're doing and that sort of thing. So a tree inventory can be very simple. It could even be just a notepad with a list of, trees and addresses and, whatever other information you want to write in there, but it also can be more sophisticated. You can put the trees on a map so that you can look at them on the computer where they are. You can track all manner of different information. The inventory software that we are using is TreePlotter, and it is a GIS-based software, which basically, like I said, just means that the trees are going to appear on the map. So if you look at this screenshot here, you can see all these little colored dots. Those each represent one of the trees in the system. And if you were to click on one of those dots, you would see this little bubble pop up that has some different information that you can interact with on the tree. And we'll get into more of that later. But I just want to kind of broadly show you this is what an inventory is. We have all these trees on the map, and then when you click on them, it pulls up the information that you've put in there about that tree. So this can be a very useful tool for a lot of different purposes. So why did we decide to create this program? First and foremost, I would say it's meant to be a tool for you guys to help you do the great work that you do out in the communities that you work in. So we wanted to make it easier for you guys. Often through the course of your work, you might be collecting either consciously or unconsciously information about the trees that you're planting or working with. And we wanted to make an easy and convenient place for you to put that information. We also wanted to make it easier for people to go back and check on the trees after they've been planted too, because that's something that, kind of some people are doing in the urban forestry community, but it takes some time and we want to make it as easy as possible because it is really a worthwhile activity to go back and check on those and see, what things have worked and what things maybe haven't worked as well. We also wanted to enable groups to be able to report their deliverables to their funders, especially CAL FIRE. That's a big one for us here in California. So we've designed the system with that in mind, that you can put in all those different attributes that CAL FIRE or whoever else might want you to report, and then you'll be able to export those out as a spreadsheet and share it with your funders. And then finally, the ultimate goal is, after people have added all this information about their programs and their trees into the system, we'll be able to kind of take a bird's eye view of what's happening across the state and try to identify, some things that are affecting tree growth and survival, either stuff that's negatively affecting it or positively affecting it, and then kind of communicate that back to you guys so that you all can help improve your programs going forward. So yeah, with that, I think I will hand it off to Maggie, and she can kind of show us the ropes of how to actually use TreePlotter.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maggie DeLauter. I'm the manager of our professional services team over at PlanIt Geo. Our team has worked with Alex to set up the California ReLeaf application. And so I'm happy to go over it today and how to use it. The first thing I'm going to share is the URL with everyone on how to access it. I believe everyone should have a login. If you do not, you'll want to reach out to Alex about that. So kind of as we're going through things, in the chat, you can click on that link, open it up, and then log in and kind of follow along here. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and share screen. I have been forgetting if I'm sharing lately or not, but okay, so when you open up the URL, you're going to see this page to start. The one thing that I like to say is we recommend Google Chrome as a preferred browser. So it's not, you won't necessarily run into issues on other browsers, but Google Chrome is our favorite. And so it tends to work best on there. The next step when you go to the app is to log in with your user credentials. So you're going to click on login in the top right corner. And next, you're going to write in your username in the top box, and then you're going to write in your password underneath it. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. So Alex should have provided login information to you. You actually can change your password, which is definitely encouraged. So to do that, I can go to the hub here, go to admin, manage account, and change password. And so what it's going to ask you for is your email, your password, and then the new password that you want to change. After you do that, you're going to submit it, and it'll send you a code in your inbox. And what that will be used for is to actually reset your password. So for those of you that will need to do that, I'm going to go ahead and share an article with a step-by-step on how to do that in the chat. So you can click on this link, and it will bring you to this page. Okay. The next thing is I am logged in currently under the same user role that everyone has. So our screen should look pretty similar once you get logged in. The next thing I'm going to talk about are the network organizations. And when you're logged into the app, you'll notice that there is this log out button in the top right corner that will say log out. If you click on that, it'll log you out. If I want to log in again, I'll click on log in the top right corner again. type in my user credentials, my username and password, and then get signed in. Okay, so the network organizations are going to be a place in TreePlotter where the trees are stored. So if you're wanting to access the inventory of your trees or add trees to your inventory, the first thing that you're going to do is click on a network organization. So in everyone's account, they should have access to this practice, not a real organization. This one's in here to kind of play with. So if anyone would like, they can click on this one. When I do that, I get this pop-up appearing on the map and it says load trees. And that's what's I'm going to click on in order to load the tree or add to the tree inventory. Now in TreePlotter, trees and planting sites are all stored within the trees layer. So they can be either one. When a planting site is put on the map, it can later become a tree. So that's kind of the intent behind that. So I'm going to load trees. And then as you can see here, I have points on the map. And like Alex said before, TreePlotter is a inventory-based system. And so, and a GIS system. And so you will see the points on the map. So as I zoom in, you'll see kind of the details of the tree when you click on the point. So if you click on any of the points on the map, you'll be able to see generalized details of the tree. So I'm going to zoom out and then click on this tree up here. And this one you can see is a big leaf maple. And their planted status is alive. It's planted and it's alive. Okay. So the next thing that I'm going to go over is adding trees or planting sites, but I'm going to pause there. Does anyone have questions on what we've gone over so far? Okay. I'm going to go over the steps.
One question.
Go ahead.
I don't see dots on mine. You're just clicking on trees. Oh wait, I do see a red dot there.
Yep, so I'm going to start back over. So once you get logged in, what you're going to do is click on one of the network organizations in the legend here. Once you click on those, I'm going to click on my practice one because that one has trees. If you have one for your organization, it might not have trees in it yet. And so we're going to practice adding them pretty soon. So if I click on the practice organization, and then I click on load trees, that will bring me to my trees layer.
I had a question.
Go ahead.
Do you want just the common name? I thought you wanted a species name.
So we're gonna go over how to add the common name pretty soon here. This
You
legend
had common
is,
name on that, yeah.
yeah, so this legend is just showing the trees by species. And in this case, it's common name.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Okay.
Yeah, you can work in whichever one you choose, is the answer to that question. Yeah.
Thank you.
I see that there's a question in the chat.
But I have a question. I'm at that legend with the trees. I'm not seeing where you started with the organization, where you selected organization.
Yep, so you'll select the organization and then you should see the load trees button here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm already at load trees. Where was the select organization part? I'm at that page right there where you are right now.
Uh-huh.
But I just started there. I'm not sure where the selecting organization step happened.
Okay, gotcha. It probably, you probably have access to one organization, so it probably zoomed you into the one that you have already.
Okay, so that's it. We just didn't have the select organization step. Okay.
Okay. Yep, sorry about that.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on whether or not you have access to one or multiple.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Sorry about that. Okay. Cool. So once I get to my trees layer here, I know that I'm in the trees layer because I have the layer right here in my legend, and it says trees. And then as someone pointed out, we have the display by, and it's showing common name on default. To add a tree, what you're gonna do is click on the add button in the top right corner. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. When I do that, this add button will turn blue. And what that means is I am in add mode. So every time I click on the map, I will add a tree. So that's just something to be cognizant of. Sometimes there are trees that get added by mistake, and that's okay. But I'm gonna click on the add button up here. And then I get to choose an add method. So TreePlotter allows you to add by map or by GPS. If you have an external GPS, we can kind of go over how to hook that up at some point. But for this purpose and this demo, I'm going to just click add by map. That one is the easiest. So I'm going to click on by map. And then I can zoom in if I need to. And then I kind of get this blue crosshair, right? And I can click on the tree on the map to add it. And I will pause there if there are any questions.
Maggie, we do have a question in the chat, and
Sure.
I think you'll probably answer this a little bit later, but are there screenshot examples of some of the things you're going over today of like as in the article and the support features you offer online on TreePlotter, like going over how to add trees, etc.?
Yeah, we do have a support site available. The link that I had shared with how to change your password, that website has a ton of resources available. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but I think that you are a resource for this group as well, if they have questions.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have any questions whatsoever, please contact me.
Okay.
And I just had a quick question, Maggie. You're
Sure.
about to add a tree and you're really kind of far out. Is that standard, or are you going to zoom in really close to make sure where the tree goes because of neighborhoods and that sort of thing? Or how does that work?
Yeah, so you can zoom in as close as you need to. When I added my tree, I was zoomed out. When you're in the fields, when you're out there, you definitely want to zoom in as close as you can. Anything else in the chat or anything?
So we have, can you add by lat long coordinates was a question?
Kind of. So to kind of, can I go over that in just a little bit? Because I don't want to close, I
Absolutely,
can't
yeah.
close out of this room.
Yeah.
Okay, and then any other questions?
The next question was, for field work, we'll use our cell phones. Will we use Google Chrome to do data entry? You can, and I think that's recommended, right, Maggie?
Yeah, Google Chrome is definitely recommended. And because it's a URL, you can access the application on any mobile device. You can access it on tablets, desktop, laptops, rough tablets, anything like that, phones. When you're on a phone, the screen can be kind of small. So if you have a tablet, we typically recommend that, but phones work just fine. Okay. We good?
Yeah, that was
Okay.
that was it.
Okay, perfect. So when I add a tree, my add button stays on up here and it continues to highlight in blue. What I tend to recommend is turning it off. If you're adding a bunch of trees in a row, you can definitely leave it on. But I typically will just turn it off because every time I click on the map, after I click on that add button, it will add a tree point on the map. So just something to be cognizant of again. Once I add the tree on the map, I have my point on the map, but then I also have a form that opens up. And so this is kind of where you will log that species information. So within here, we have a scientific name. So you can click on the scientific name. And the nice thing about the way that this is stored is I can search. So Abies alba, silver fir, it all kind of populates at once. I don't have to worry about finding the common name after that. It'll auto-populate. The next thing is the status. The status will auto-populate as alive as well. The user experience is something that is required. So if I were to try and close out of this form, it's going to tell me that I need to fill in a value for these fields. What that means is that those fields are required. It means that you have to fill them out when you add a tree. It won't let you actually log the tree unless you fill out those fields. As far as the meaning of these, Alex, I believe you'll go over that later. That's correct, right? Okay, so I'm going to
Correct,
fill
yeah.
these in with random information. And so I'm going to fill in my stock type, planted by our organization and user expertise. And then I can fill in the nursery, the date distributed, the date planted. You can fill in whatever information you're looking to store. And then location information, the address will fill in automatically. So that's just something to be cognizant of. My address did not fill in here because I am not exactly in a city. So it doesn't, Google Maps is what fills it in automatically. So if the Google Map, location does not know where you're at, like if you're in a park or something, you won't necessarily see the address fill in, but you will still get a city and county that fills in. The other thing that fills in automatically is the census tract, GeoID. And then the other thing is the DAC status, and this has to do with CAL FIRE. And so we'll kind of get there in a second. The other thing that fills in is the latitude and longitude. So if you want to export out the points and have the locations of all of your trees, the longitude and latitude fill in automatically. And then there's a bunch of other fields that you can fill out. Within the projects tab, we have planting information. So there's a bunch of, so for example, if C's planting is the project or the planting event name, then the project name can fill in automatically. And then we have the care and health tab. And so all of these tabs make up the tree details. So we have tree, the location of the tree, any projects that the tree is associated with or planting site, and then care and health. And I'm going to stop there. Any questions in the chat?
Yes, I have one.
Sure.
You said some of those fields were required. Is that user defined or is that part of TreePlotter? And how will we know which, maybe in front, prior to know which fields are required so we can have that data ready at least?
Yeah, so when you try to close out the form, so I'm going to go ahead and just add another tree really quick to kind of show you what it looks like if you don't fill them out. If I try and close it out, it'll tell me to fill it in. The ones that are required, there's user expertise, date distributed by our org, and then stock type. So it's the 3 of these right here.
Oh, just those 3.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I was thinking it might have been a whole big list.
Yeah, and then scientific name as well. So you have to select a type of tree.
Okay, well, you're right. Okay, that's manageable. I wanted to just have that info up front, which we would have up front anyway. All right.
So I have another question. Put one in the chat, but what is, when it says user expertise, does that mean user of the software or does that mean user of tree planting?
Yeah, we'll go over that a little later, but it's
that's
talking
software.
about you, the user.
Of the software, not expertise about trees.
We'll talk about it later, but it could be.
Thank you. That's
it could be
what I
both, yeah.
But what is date distributed as opposed to date planted? I mean, we always get our trees right before we plant them, so I don't understand what that means.
Yeah, so let's try to focus on how to use it first, and then we'll talk about all these different fields later, just because
All right.
we could ask about each one, but it would take a lot of time. So I will go over that later.
All right.
Okay, someone asked really quick how they can remove a tree. So you have the add button clicked on, and like I said, every time you add a tree on the map, or every time you click on the map when you're out in the field, it adds a tree. Well, something happens sometimes where you accidentally add a tree that you didn't want, like you didn't mean to add a tree for. If that's the case, you can use the delete button right here. It's available to you. So if you wanted to delete this tree, you can. There are some trees that you're not going to be able to delete, but if you add a tree accidentally, you should be able to delete it using that button. The other question that we had was adding trees by lat and long. So I want to kind of return there. And I need a volunteer from the audience. Does somebody want to give me an address? Anyone?
Sure, I will.
Okay, so hold on one second before you tell me what it is. What I'm gonna have you do is type it in the chat.
All right.
Okay. A lot of trees get planted by address. Say there's a homeowner that's looking to get a tree planted in their yard or something that's pretty common. So what TreePlotter allows you to do is actually search for an address. And the way that I recommend doing that is using this globe icon right here. So if I click on the globe icon on the left, I can type in whatever address I want. So go ahead and send me that address.
Oh, I sent it to everybody, but there you go. I don't care.
Okay.
Who has it.
That's okay. In Fremont. Okay. And so the important thing when you're typing in an address, this is absolutely perfect. So you did a great job. We've got a house number, so that's cool. We don't necessarily need a house number, right? But that's super detailed and it'll bring me right to that location, right? The other thing is a street name. The street name definitely required if you want an accurate location. The city and the state are also required. So if I take this away and I just type in Miller Place, it'll probably lead me to somewhere else, and not California. And so
Right.
what you want to do is type in Fremont. So you want to make sure that the city and the state, including California, are typed in every time. And now, if I click enter or if I click search, what this will do is actually bring me to an address. The other cool thing about this little globe here is that I can type in a latitude and longitude. So if I wanted to type in a latitude and longitude, I could do that and click on search, and then it'll bring me straight to that location also.
That's great.
And then after that, I get this red pin on the map. Now that's not a tree that's added, right? The trees
Address.
are the little green, they're little dots, the little different colored dots on the map. This is just a place marker. So now what I can do is zoom in, click on add, click on by map, and then add my tree. Does that help? I don't remember who answered that question. I'm talking too much. Yeah, if you get brought to Australia, you have to type in the town and the state in order to get put in the right place. Okay, and then now I can fill in all my information again, right? I got my scientific name populated, stock type, and all my required things, and now I can close out.
Yeah, can you just circle on the screen there where planted distributed by our org is? It looks like somebody was having trouble finding it. So it's
Great.
part of the form there. You just have to select one of those options before you close it.
Yep. Okay. So I'm gonna uncheck my add button so I don't just, or I'm gonna close out of the form first. Notice how I still have my little little blue dot and my kind of cross on the map. That's going to add another tree if I click on the map. So again, you want to turn off that add button. That's huge. I'm just gonna delete this one. So when I turn off the add button, say we have this address and I actually plotted the wrong tree. I put it in the wrong place on the map, and where I actually meant to put it was here on Miller Place, right? Easy peasy. What you can do is click on the move button right here at the top. That's going to highlight in blue. And then what that's going to do is allow you to click and drag at the point wherever you want. Right? So now I can move it to the right spot. It says, are you sure you want to move this point? I'm going to say yes. And then, do you want to update your address? I can click yes. Now, if I open up the point, the one thing that I said about the address before is that because I was in kind of a rural area, it didn't fill in. You'll notice here that it did fill in because I am in an urban place. So it's always good to double check the address because it can be slightly off. It's run by Google, so anything that's like a new HOA area, you might not get the right things filling in. So it is good to double check that information. Okay, any questions on adding or moving before I move on?
But we have somebody in the chat, and I apologize, I don't see your name, that says they're getting the message that fields are required, but the tree form is closed. Have you ever encountered that before?
I haven't seen that. So when you add the tree, are you seeing the full form, the full vertical form to fill out?
So I think the question was from Valley of the Moon Garden Club. And so if you're on, if you want to unmute yourself and tell us what you're seeing, that might be helpful.
Yeah, or if your audio is not working right now, we can always come back to it later and troubleshoot after the presentation. Either way.
Okay. Cool. So, all right. The move button, I will say, is a little different on mobile. So if you're on a tablet or a phone, you can highlight the move button here, and then all you do is just kind of use your finger. You'll pick it up with your finger and drag it to the right spot. Very similar to with a mouse, but it just is a little bit of a different feeling. So I do like to say that before we move on. Okay, for the legend, we're gonna go over some legend things here with the colors. This is probably my favorite. One of my favorite things about TreePlotter is all the colors. So I'm gonna zoom out and we can kind of look at this from a larger view here. We're all the way by Fremont. Okay, we've got some of our other ones in Napa. So I have a total of 15 trees as part of this practice organization. The first thing I'm going to go over is the layer drop down. So like I said before, if I click on the layer drop down, I can go back to the network organizations list, or I can go to my zones, which is a polygon layer, or I can go to my trees. The trees are primarily where you're going to add your planting sites and your trees kind of starting out. The display by is probably one of my most favorite parts of the app, mainly because we can change colors based on different sorts of values that the tree has. So if I want to view the colors by scientific name, I can go ahead and do that, which is really nice. I can also view the trees by condition. Now I don't, none of them actually have a condition filled in. But if they did, then we would get all different colors on the map. And the same thing for DBH. So I can say that all of the red ones don't actually have a DBH entered. They could just be planting sites or proposed planting sites. And then the green trees have down here, we've got 0 to 3 DBH as a range. So that tends to be really nice because you can view the trees in a different color and then like print maps and stuff. To give to whoever you need to, whether it's field crews or volunteers or other people who are doing the plantings. The other aspect of this that's pretty important to go over is the numbers that show up. So if I go back to common name, you'll notice that I'm showing 12 of 14 sites. Now this number can be kind of important because as I zoom into the map, you'll see that this first number changes. So the 7 sites is how many trees I'm showing in my map view. Whereas the second number is how many trees are in this organization as total. So when you load your, so say I go back to network organizations and I go to your children's trees and I click on load trees, because that's the other one that I have in here just randomly. There's 1,746. That's a lot. 1,746 trees in total that y'all have in your inventory, which is awesome. So I'm going to go back to network organizations and go back to my practice one so I can play with the data. And then if I load trees, you can see that I have 14 here to play with. And you can add as many to this site if you have access to the site as you need to. It's a great practice. Okay, and then kind of moving on with the numbers. If I want to know how many Oregon oak are within my site, I can look at the species and the legend here and figure that out. So the number next to Oregon oak is 2. That means that I have 2 Oregon oak in my inventory. So those can be kind of quick stats to look at to kind of get a gist of what your species diversity looks like. If I switch it over to DBH, and I see that I have 13 NAs and then 1 small tree, I can figure out my size class distribution this way also. To make points disappear off the map, you can kind of mess with these buttons. So if I kind of out of the way here, where's that? Okay, here it is. So if I zoom in here, you'll notice that if I check off the 0 to 3 tree, it will disappear from off the map. Keep in mind that it's really just hiding it because if I click in that space, I still get a pop-up that shows up. So it's not really like a filter. It's just kind of a quick way to hide things. And you just can't really see it, but it's sort of still there. So when it comes to filtering data, I don't typically recommend using the legend to do that. Unless you're looking for some sort of like quick way to filter, only because it's not a true filter. We don't call it a true filter. So that's just one thing to note. Any questions on the legend and kind of what you're seeing over here on the right?
We do have 2 questions. They're not quite on the legend. One is how can we control who can mess with our tree data? Basically, anyone within your organization, any users that we create that are within that organization. So you guys are all in the practice organization right now, but once you're ready to switch over, I'll switch you over to an organization that corresponds to your actual group that you work with. And then any users within that group we'll be able to modify some of that data. And then I also have the ability to modify it, but I won't do that without telling you. But otherwise, other users, like if somebody's from a totally different organization, but they're still on our TreePlotter system, they will not be able to modify your data. So hopefully that answers your question. And then the other question is, what is DBH? DBH is the diameter of the trunk of the tree at a specified height, usually at chest height.
Okay. So the next thing I'm going to go over is how to filter on data. So I understand that you could have planting sites or proposed trees versus alive trees, right? And so you might want to know how many have been planted over time, or you might want to know how many oak trees there are, something like that. So the best way to do that is to filter the data. So of course we can look at the common names and kind of like count them up, right? So oaks, we have like 4 here and then 2 here, but that's kind of a pain, especially when you have thousands of trees that you've logged, right? So we want a quick and efficient way to filter on the data. So the next thing that we're going to go over is the filter. There's 2 ways to access it. And one of them is right here in the, what we call the navigation toolbar with the globe. So the funnel icon is going to open up the filter. Okay, so as soon as I click on the funnel icon, I get to the filter here. And what I can do is filter on common name first, if I want to. The nice thing about this is I can type in oak, right? And I can get all of the oaks, all of the oaks that I can then check, right? So looking at my legend, I only have Coast Live Oak and Oregon Oak. So I can just click on those if I want. And so if I go down to the C's, everything's in alphabetical order, which is also nice and easy to find things. So I'll scroll down and just click on those and then click apply. And when I do that, oops, I'm just going to move the filter over to the side. You'll see that I have 3 trees up here, if you can see them. And then 2 trees over here. I know my screen can be kind of small when I'm sharing. And then 1 down here. So I've got 4 Coast Live Oaks and then 2 Oregon Oaks. And so from there, if I want to figure out, okay, weird things are highlighting. Give me 1 second. There we go. If I want to figure out how many of those are proposed planting sites or proposed trees, as opposed to alive trees, I can then filter on the status, right? So if you all remember when we were in the tree form, so I'm just going to click on a tree and I'm going to open up details. And what that will do is open up the form that showed up when I started to add the trees. If I go to status, there are options to fill in whether or not it was never planted, removed and replaced, proposed tree, right? So for this tree, I'm going to fill it in as a proposed tree, just for this example. But the status is something that you can filter on. So if you want to see how many of them were canceled or missing or never planted, this would be a great way to do it, as long as you're filling in the data, right? So that's like the big thing. If you don't fill in the data, then it won't be there. So you want to make sure that you're filling in the data. Okay, so closing out of the tree form, I can then go into my filter again. So I'm going to bring this back to the middle of my screen here. And I don't see the status listed in my list right here. So I'm going to click on add field. And I get a more full list of things to filter on. So I'm going to scroll down to my status. And I'm going to add that. And now it comes in within the filter here. So I'm going to pause there. If I click on status, and then I click on anything that is proposed, and I click apply, it's going to show me the 2 on the map that are proposed trees and not yet planted. Does that make sense?
I didn't follow where that was. Where's status?
So status is going to be in this add field dropdown. So if you go right underneath trees, all of the tree fields are going to be listed in here in alphabetical order. And so if you don't see it right away in the green parts of the filter, you'll be able to go to this add field dropdown, scroll down to the S's, and then click on status.
Yeah, sorry. Mine doesn't look like that at all. Network organizations.
Oh, I see. Okay, click on the plus sign.
On the tree, yeah. I did that. I got this little select a layer.
Yep, so you'll click on
Select,
trees. If you have the select a layer, I know where you're at. I'm not there. Here, so it probably looks like
I
this,
see
right?
trees inspection. Yeah, the little, well, I have trees inspection. Okay, I don't have net. Okay, yes.
So
Zones, I have that. Yeah.
Yep, so you probably already have trees in the filter here. So if you close out of that little box, you should see trees right here. And then if you click on add field, it's underneath the plus sign. So instead of the plus sign, you'll click on the drop down.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then you'll scroll down to the S's.
Oh, okay. Let me see. All right.
Do you see it there?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yes. Thank you.
And then once you click on it, like, so for example, if I want to look at DAC status, if I click on this, then I can set a filter. So by adding the field, all it does is kind of add it to this green list. And if there are useful fields that you tend to always go back to, that's a great thing to tell Alex, and then Alex will tell me, and I will get it set so that you don't have to add that anymore. You can set it on default. Any questions? I know the filter can be kind of, like, there's so much that you can do with the filter, so I'm leaving it very high level. Any questions? Okay. The one more thing that I did want to go over is how to set a filter in a specific location. So I'm going to clear my filters, and the way that I do that is I'm going to clear all filters. There's a button at the top, right? Once you have a filter applied, that button will show up and it'll give you the option to clear everything. And so when I click on that, you'll notice that all my trees come back. All 14 of them come back on the map. If I would like to set a filter for just my Napa trees, I can easily do that. And the way that I would do that is by clicking on this button that says Tree Map Filter. So what this button allows you to do is if I click on it, the filter minimizes and I no longer see the filter. And now I have this funky blue dot next to my cursor. And what this allows me to do is click in a specific area and set a filter to just one area. So every time I'm clicking on the map, I'm creating a vertex in a polygon. And so what I'm doing is kind of lassoing the area. And so every time I click on the map, I'm creating another vertex to where I can make this really funky polygon. And when I'm done drawing my polygon, I double click on the map and it'll finish it for me. So after I do that, if I open my filter, you'll see that I only have these on the map showing. I only have my 8 showing. So I can set a filter for many things at once, kind of like we've gone over. You can set a filter for a given area. So if you have a planting project that happened in a specific park, you can draw a polygon around that park for just those planted trees. And then you can share a map with whoever you need to label them or whatever else, report on them, etc. And then you can also apply a filter for something like the species or the DBH to understand what sort of maintenance needs to be done to the trees on your map. And so that is kind of it for the filter. The last thing that I was going to go over was I'm going to clear out this polygon is a little giving me stress by the look of it. It's messy. So I'm going to clear all filters and I'm going to bring back all my trees. And so I know that this training can be a lot for a lot of people, right? And there might be some confusion after. Anyone, anyone on this call is more than welcome to kind of check out the resources that we have available. So if there's a couple of different things with support that are in the app that I did want to kind of show everyone. So if you click on this support button right at the top here, what happens is our website will open up and you'll be able to see, I'm logged in to edit our website, which is why I have this funky header, but you'll see our website pull up and you can search like how to use the filter, right? How to save a filter, watch a video with the filter. There's a ton of things that you can do. We also have an article on adding trees and how to do that, right? We've got a video that you can click on to learn how to add a tree. So if anyone forgets any of this stuff or anyone is like, oh no, what do I do? There's this recording, there's Alex, and then we also have our website to go to. Within the app, kind of going back to TreePlotter, there is this question mark at the bottom here. If you click on this question mark, you actually can write us a question directly within the application. So you'll have to put your email so that we can get back to you over email. And then you can put in the device that you're using, which is helpful if you're experiencing any problems. So whether or not it's a desktop, a tablet, or a phone, what operating system, so whether you're using like Apple devices, Mac computers, that kind of thing, Androids, and then what browser you're using. And then you can write us a message, let us know that you're not a robot, and click submit, and it'll come right to us. Are there any questions? To clear, I think I see one about clearing filters. So if you open up the funnel icon and you go to the apply button in the top left of the tool, so I'll open it up. You should see a clear all filter button if you have filters applied, and you'll be able to click on that to clear the filters that you have applied. So if I have a common name filter, and then click apply, the clear all filter button is going to be right up here. And if you click on that, it'll clear the filters for you.
Yeah, if you don't see the clear button there, it might be that you haven't applied your filter yet. So if you checked things down below, remember you have to hit apply up at the top.
Yep.
Before it'll take effect.
Yep. The other way to know if you have a filter applied can be this box right here. So in the top right corner, it'll tell you whether or not filters are applied. However, keep in mind that when you load trees for your network organization, there's going to be an automatic filter placed on the map for just your trees. So you should have a filter applied most of the time. So that can be helpful. If you have something applied on the trees layer, you'll see that clear all filter button in the filter.
So we have a question.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, we have a question about how to find menus on the iPhone.
I can actually turn my screen into something really fancy right now. And we can go over what it looks like really quickly. So if I change this to an iPhone 12 Pro, I'm gonna just refresh the page. The menu button is going to be right up here. And then to get to the map, you're going to click on map, and that will bring you right to the map. Any of the tools are going to be in the menu button on mobile. So you can click on legend, you can click on data. Data is the data table. And then the hub is where we logged in and things like that. Does that help?
Yeah, I was finding them eventually, but I was just a few steps behind trying to find everything.
That's okay. Did you have any other questions?
No, I just have to practice it to find everything. I'm sure it's in here somewhere.
Okay. Any other questions?
Maggie, we did have a question about, is there a preferred phone type or tablet type, or does that matter?
It depends. I think it really works on any mobile device like Android or iPhone. Depending on the device, there can be different complications. Android 14, if you have an Android and Android 14 is running on your Android, there is a change that they made when they rolled out that Android version that kind of has intersected with the way that photos are captured. So the photo has to get captured first if you're taking a photo of the tree, stored to your camera library or your photo library, and then uploaded to the tree rather than the camera connecting directly to TreePlotter. Whereas on iPhones, there's a separate thing with base maps and Google base maps in our offline version of the app. So you kind of have to dig really deep in order to find those things. So typically there's limitations for different things, and you got to go really deep in order to find them. So we don't really have a preferred phone or mobile device that we recommend. Our field crews, because we do have field crews that go out and use TreePlotter every day to collect inventories, they prefer Android, but they use both Android and iPhones. I hope that helps. As browsers update and as versions update, there's always kind of things going on in different places. And so we try and fix what we can as soon as we can fix it. But sometimes it's a cause, like the cause is on the Chrome side or on the Android side. And sometimes we can't, we try and set up workarounds for those things when there are issues. Any other questions?
So there was a question about importing past data that you might have collected. That's something that I'll need to assist you with. But I highly recommend for now just to start playing around. You can add whatever, you can add pretend trees all day to this practice organization that you are all in right now. So get used to the basics, and then I'll switch you over to the real organization. You can start manually adding some real data if you want to. And I would highly recommend that to kind of get used to the features, get familiar with things. And then once you've got kind of a solid understanding, then we can talk about, adding a bigger chunk of data. But I think it's going to be helpful for you guys to get a little comfortable before we do that. Now, if you have a specific program you're trying to do right away, that needs you to add a bunch of data all at once, let's meet and talk about how we can help you with that. But yeah, otherwise I would just kind of start incrementally and learn as you go.
As far as saving to the device offline, we do have what we call an offline module that you can use to collect data when you're not connected to internet. If you're just starting out with the system, I recommend going to areas with internet where you can kind of practice adding trees first. But we do have an article on our support site with a video on how to use our offline module. The offline module is essentially just a different link, and there are some rules surrounding it. So if you start to dive into that or need it, definitely talk to Alex or I, and we can kind of guide you through.
Yeah, I guess maybe we could do like a brief show of hands. If people know how to use the raise hand feature, it's down in the bottom of Zoom under reactions, or you can raise your hand on camera too. That's fine. How many people think that they would need to use the offline mode? How often are you working in areas where there's no service? So a good number. So we'll probably want to cover that at a future training then, but if you're going to need it right away, definitely talk to me and I can walk you through it. I was going to mention this a bit later as well, but we're going to have some kind of sandbox sessions set up here. One of them, the first one's tomorrow at 2 p.m. So those you can sign up for on our website. They're capped at 5 spaces. So the idea is that's kind of like a smaller, more one-on-one. We'll kind of guide you through, troubleshoot, whatever it is that you need to do. So if you are looking to use offline mode right away or any other feature that we haven't covered in detail here, go ahead and sign up for one of those and we'll get you rolling. So we have a question, once plotted, is the data available to anyone? No, it is visible to you. There's a very limited amount of data that the public can see. So they can see the dot on the map, where the tree is and maybe some other basic information about it. But we're not going to share anything that would be confidential. So if there's anything specifically you wouldn't want the public to see, maybe communicate that to me if there's a concern that you have. But in general, the only people that will have full access to all of your data are California ReLeaf and then your users as well. And I guess PlanIt Geo.
Yeah, we tend to add trees in the water if we add trees, but we try and delete them. This way you know that they're not real. And user1 is our typical login name, so Alex can keep us at bay. But we don't really go in and add trees unless we're like testing something, some sort of issue or something. So yeah, the data belongs to you all. So
Okay, any other questions there before we move on? Daly, you got your hand up. I don't know if that was still from the question I asked earlier. Okay, just making sure. Okay, well, I think we actually have a couple minutes left. If you think you could go through it in time, Maggie, do you want to show us how, like, kind of introduce the concept of the project table and how to modify that? That might be helpful
Sure.
for people to know.
Yeah. So I'll share screen again. So if I go into my practice organization and I load trees, if I click on a tree, or let's add one. So I'm going to add one, click the add button in the top, click on by map. I'm going to zoom in. There we go. And then plot this tree right here. I'm going to assign a scientific name and all of my required things, so it doesn't tell me to fill them out. And then go to projects. And so if I have a tree that, or a plant or a proposed tree that or planting site that I am logging into TreePlotter to keep track of within a specific project, I can click on planting event name and I can click on edit table. And what that will do is open up the table for me. If I want to add a project name, a planting event name, a grant ID, and a grant year, I can store all of this information within this one table. I'll click on add, and for me, it will be like, I don't know, spring 2024 planting jamboree is my name. And then project name is, I forget what town we're in. I don't remember. School planting. And then I can put in my grant ID, right? Which in my case will be a number here. And then like 2024 is when I got my grant. And so now I can close out of this table. And now when I fill in my spring 2024 planting jamboree, you'll see that I get my planting event name, my project name, my grant ID, and my grant year kind of all auto-populating within the form. And so if there are any events that you're having, you can fill it in when you go to plot that first tree. If I go to plot my second tree, click on by map. I'm going to fill in all my required fields here. Go to proposed site. And then go to my projects. I can then select my 2024 spring planting jamboree. And then I have everything filled in already. So you only have to add it to the table that one time. And to do that, you'll click on edit table. So again, if I click on planting event name or project name, I can edit the table directly from there. You can go ahead and add your projects into this table to keep track of in the future. To kind of tie it all together, if we have like one more minute, what I can do is I've got these two trees now on the map. If I want to filter for all of the trees that were part of that project, I can then add that field. So I'll go down to my list. Click on planting event name. I would select it. Oop, that's the wrong one actually. Turn some of these off. That one. Click on done selecting. And then click apply to actually apply the filter. And I think we've got one other tree that was added that is part of my planting event. So we've got one in Napa too. So now I know I have 3 trees that were planted as a product of my planting event, and I can then export out the data, share a map, do whatever you got to do for reporting. Any questions on that?
So
How do you
we
initiate
did,
that?
sorry, go.
Just the table editor. How do you initiate that?
Yeah, so let me go over it again. So you can
Definitely want to do that for our planting sites, each different area.
yeah, so if you have a bunch that you just want to add, right, and there's no trees planted or no trees that you want to log yet, another way that you can edit, and maybe a more direct way in some cases, would be clicking on the hub here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if you have like a list of planting events that you know that you do every year or something, you can get them added to the table right away, and then you don't have to worry about it when you're actually in the field inventorying or planting those trees. And so if you click on the hub and then you go to data tools and then you go to lookup table editor, there's this planting event table right there.
Can you see it?
Lookup table editor. All right.
Yep. And then the planting event the planting event table is right there, and you can go ahead and add to that table. Question?
Yeah, that's where you would also export it. You'd export.
If you want to export out all of the planting events in the California ReLeaf app across the entire state, yes, you can download it right
No,
here.
just
So
a
it's not going to be
single event.
focused just for your organization. I think what you're asking is exporting out the tree data. Is that right?
For a single event, yes.
Yes. So the first thing that you would do is set your filter for the planting event name so that you're just capturing those trees on the map, right?
Mm-hmm.
The easiest way to export in TreePlotter after that is to click on the hub here again, go to data tools. The data tools section is basically anything referring to the data. I don't know a better way to explain that, but and then if you click on exporter, this will export it out into a CSV, which is like an Excel sheet, or a shapefile, which is a GIS layer that you can import into another system. So if I click on CSV and then I click on trees and then click export, I can give it a name if you would like to give it a name. If I save that and I open it, I can show you what it looks like. And these are my 3 trees right here. So I didn't fill in a lot of information.
Right,
If I
right.
filled in more, I would get more, but this will
understand.
have all of the information.
And that file can be attached to the grant report as a CVS file and just leave it like that. I mean, or do I have to actually do I have to have this as a page printed in a grant report, or can I just export if I'm doing it electronically? Can I just have a link to that file?
So it's
That's the
going to
Alex
depend.
question.
It's going to depend on the funder and what their requirements are.
You're the funder.
Oh, we're the funder?
Yeah,
Well,
part of the funder, yeah. You're the funder.
Yeah, I'm not sure how Victoria is going to want those, and she's not here. So
Okay, I'll talk to Victoria. So our event has not happened yet because it was rain delayed, so it's fine. I'll just want to ask her.
yeah,
Okay.
let's talk to Victoria about that.
Thank you so much. And I still had that other question a long time ago that you didn't answer. What was the question I asked earlier? Something about some letters. Yeah. About 5-page notes here. This seems very intuitive to me. Then I use computers and plotting things a lot. So what was this question I had? Well, it should be still in the chat there. Shoot. I can't find it because I'm looking at a soil seminar, sorry.
Yeah, we could always return to it at the end too if you can't find it right now.
Okay.
If you find it later, let us know.
And what's the sandbox thing tomorrow?
Yeah, so I was gonna talk about that a little bit later, but I can explain it right now.
We're going on. I thought it seems like it was over. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, well, there's a part 2 where I'm going to talk about all those different little fields that we had in the detail form and what they all mean.
Never mind, man, just forget.
But yeah, I do want to mention the sandbox because that's an important thing. Those are basically kind of like a smaller group, more like one-on-one kind of guided to what you want to know. And that is the next one is those are limited to 5 people, kind of first come, first serve. So if you're interested, sign up on our website. The page that Megan linked in the chat earlier, and you'll be able to get some more hands-on instruction if you would like that. Because this is kind of guided towards like, we can't cover everything, right? But it's kind of guided towards what I think everybody's going to be using. But probably for each of you, there's going to be something special that you're doing that might be a little different than everybody else. And so, you know, it might not make sense to cover that for the training with everyone, but we can do that one-on-one. And if those times don't work out for you, please let me know because I can make more time available too. So. Okay, so with that, I think unless there's any other questions for Maggie, Cindy?
I was just going to say, your question was, what is the date distributed? And Alex was going to answer that later.
Yeah, that's actually going to be part of my next presentation that we're doing here. So I'll cover
Okay,
that.
perfect. Never mind.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Maggie.
Thank you. It's great to meet
and-
everyone.
Yeah, see you later.
See ya.
All right, so I'm going to go back to sharing my screen here. And we will try to move through this quickly because there's a lot of questions, which is great. I love that. I'm glad people are engaging and asking questions. That's what we want. So, okay. So, what I want to talk about next is kind of what we're asking of you, as you're using this software. Obviously, it's very broad in terms of what you can do, very customizable. But remember that, whatever data that you put into the system, we want to make sure that it's true and accurate to the best of our ability. Because fundamentally, if you put data in there that's incorrect and then you come back later, you're not gonna be able to tell then, you might notice a few things are off, but you're not gonna be able to tell then which data was collected correctly and which was collected incorrectly. So getting that mixed in there is really a problem. So obviously, there's going to be mistakes. That's fine. We're not asking for perfection, but we do want to make sure that, we're making an effort. And if there's anything that's ever unclear or uncertain, or, you're doing something and you're like, I don't know if this is the best way to be doing this, that's where I am here to help you. So please reach out to me if you ever have any questions on anything. So a couple things to mention briefly. We do not want anyone to share accounts. So if only you should be logging into your account, you as an individual, not organization, right? If there are additional people who need accounts, we can create more for you. And once you get a little bit more experience with TreePlotter as well, we can even maybe enable you to create additional accounts for people if needed. But again, that's really important because if they accidentally do something incorrectly and we have to go back and try to investigate what happened, we really want to be able to tell who did what, not because we're going to punish anyone or anything, but just because it helps them. We can ask them questions about what went wrong and things like that. Some of the fields we do ask that you use in certain specific ways. So we'll have a lot of information on that in terms of especially if you're measuring the tree, want to make sure that those measurements are taken in kind of a standardized way so that they're comparable across the whole system. You do not need to fill out every field. So there's obviously a ton of fields on there. There are a few that are required, and that's the ones that we looked at earlier that the system will tell you about if you don't fill them out. The rest of the fields are optional. So if you feel like you have good information on that, feel free to go ahead and fill it out. If you're not sure, you don't need to guesstimate. If you're, just because it asks you, well, how tall is the tree? You don't have to say, well, I think I remember it was about 10 feet. That's the kind of thing we want to avoid. Because again, then once that's in there, it says 10 feet, we're going to look at it and say, oh, well, I guess somebody measured it at 10 feet. And who knows, maybe it was 20 feet, right? And then finally, we ask that you please do not delete any information from the system. We're really trying to get a full picture here. If you accidentally create a tree, that's fine to delete, of course, because it's not real information, right? But anytime you put real information into the system, we want to preserve that. So there shouldn't really be any situation where you need to delete a tree. There are ways to hide them if they're getting in your way or something like that. We can talk about that. But especially not if a tree dies. That's some of the most important information that we want to look at because we want to figure out why did that tree not survive? That's really important. So don't delete a tree just because it died. Okay, so the first and most important thing to put in when you're recording a tree is what species it is. This might sound simple, but it actually can get a little complicated in some ways. For one thing, trees have multiple names potentially, especially common names. So if you say, oh, I planted a tulip tree in my park, I might not know which tulip tree you're talking about because there's actually 3 different trees that potentially go by that name. So for that reason, we do recommend getting used to and using scientific names because the advantage of a scientific name is there is only one correct name for each type of tree. And that means if you use the correct name and I know the correct name, there's no chance of a miscommunication. We always know exactly what that means, right? Now, there is a caveat there, which is that scientific names sometimes change over time. Botanists sometimes realize that one tree that they thought was related to this group, it's actually with this group, and they have to move it over. And because of that, they change the name. Or they might realize that what we thought was one species is actually two species. Things like that happen pretty regularly. So this link here was developed by Matt Ritter, and this is a list of trees that had their names changed recently. So not a bad idea to take a look at that. Just update yourself, see if there's anything that you need to be aware of. Because our list of trees, the scientific names in there, those all come from Select Tree, which you guys might be familiar with, but if not, it's like an online tree encyclopedia for the state of California. So highly recommend taking a look at that if you have not seen it. And Megan, if you can put the link in the chat, that would be great. So the nice thing about Select Tree is that you can go in there and there's a search function and you can search for whatever name you might know a tree by. So if you are saying, well, I've always called this tree a tulip tree, but I actually don't know which of these 3 Latin names it is, right? You can go into Select Tree, you can type in tulip tree, and it'll come back with a list with pictures, and you can say, oh, that's the one I want. You click on it, and it'll give you the correct scientific name. And because our list of names comes from their website, if you go back and type that in, then it'll be the correct one. And everything will be good. So that's what I recommend doing. The first thing, if you can't find a tree in our system, if you're looking for a species and you can't find it, search on Select Tree to make sure that you're using the same name that we're using. And then if you still can't find it, if it's either not in Select Tree or there's a discrepancy, then you can reach out to me directly and I'll help you figure it out. Hopefully we have all the trees that anyone would ever want to plant in California in there now, but you never know, there might be one that's not in there. Okay, the next big field I want to talk about is status. Status kind of refers to, it's a bit of a broad idea, but it's like the status of the tree's existence is a way I've heard it summarized, which I think is kind of a funny way to say it. But this basically tells us, is the tree alive in the ground? Is it a tree that we're going to plant in the future? Is it a tree that has died and was there in the past? That's kind of the idea behind status, is like where in the process of kind of the planting process are we with this tree? Because again, you can put a tree on the map that's a future proposed tree. You don't have to, but that's an option that's available to you. So I'm going to quickly go over these various statuses that you have available to you. And then we'll kind of go through some situations and where to use which status after that. So the first one is proposed tree. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. That's when you're planning to plant a tree, but it hasn't happened yet. So this can be useful if you want to put the trees on the map. You can print it out, share it with your local parks department, wherever might want to look at it. Next is canceled. This is a tree that was proposed, but then for whatever reason, it ended up not working out. You decide to cancel it. Maybe the parks department says, no, we can't put a tree there because that's where the softball league plays or something. So importantly, canceled tree is a tree that was intentionally canceled before it was planted. So I know that might sound kind of weird, but there are other situations that can come up. And you'll use a different status for those. So canceled means intentionally, and before planting, it was canceled. Delivered to partner. So this is a status to use if you do any kind of like tree giveaway programs or a program where you give a tree to a partner like a school or a park and you're not there at the planting. So you don't actually know if the tree was planted. That's why we want to make this distinction. We hope that it was, right? And it probably was, but we don't know for sure. So that's where you can set the tree to say, we gave it away, it's probably planted, but we don't know for sure. So if you do know that the tree was planted, either because you were there or because your partner tells you, hey, I planted it last Saturday, then you can move the tree to planted alive. And that means the tree's in the ground, it's alive, everything's good. That's probably going to be the vast majority of the trees. And that is also the default. When you enter any tree, it starts at that because that's most of them. So keep in mind, if you do want to use one of these other statuses, that you'll have to remember to change it. So when I'm adding a map of proposed trees, I'm going to need to go back and change them from alive to proposed to make sure that we don't get confused later. Importantly, the alive is referring to the main trunk and branches of the trees. And that's a little bit arbitrary, but that's where we decided to draw the line because, it can be kind of ambiguous whether a tree is alive or dead sometimes, which sounds strange. But, if the leaves are dead, but the trunk is alive, it's alive. And if the trunk is dead, but the roots are alive, you're going to count it as dead. So the next one, standing dead, just means the tree's still there. But again, the above ground portions, excluding the roots or any little sprouts that might be coming from the roots. But the main trunk and branches are all dead. And then next we have planted stump. That's just a tree that's been cut down. Pretty self-explanatory on that one. We have planted removed. So this is for, after the stump is gone, or if you fully remove the tree from the beginning, basically, this means there used to be a tree here. We did in fact plant it, but now it's gone. And this is important to distinguish because it tells you that the tree was planted and then it died, right? So something went wrong there. Versus the next one, never planted, means a tree that you intended to plant. Usually this happens because you gave it to a partner, you gave it away to a resident or something, and then they just didn't ever plant it. You talk to them, 2 years later, and they're like, oh yeah, I forgot to do it or something. It does happen. So that's important for us to know because we don't really need to ask the question of why is the tree not there? Why did it not survive? It's because it never was planted, right? And this can also happen through some kind of logistical error. Like let's say you accidentally mark a tree was planted, but it never was, and you discover this later, you can go ahead and mark that as never planted. And again, both of these last two statuses, you want to have some evidence to support them because it can be confusing to tell the difference between them sometimes. Like if you go to the site and you just see that the tree is not there, but you don't necessarily know why, then you're going to use the missing status. And this exists because there will be situations in some programs where you can't actually tell whether the tree was planted and then removed or whether it was never planted at all because it's just not there and you can't get a hold of the person that was supposed to plant it. Okay, and then we have removed and replaced. This is to designate that a tree has been replaced by a new tree in its place, just to make sure that you don't get confused about which is which. And you do, when you replace a tree, you do want to create it as a new tree in the system. You don't want to take the old tree and transform it into the new one, because then we would lose the information about the old tree, which could be a benefit, right? Like especially if it's a spot where maybe you've planted 3-4 trees and they've all died, like that's good to know, right? Because maybe there's something wrong with that planting site. So by marking it as removed and replaced, you can say, hey, this tree is done with, we did plant it, it didn't make it, there's another one that's in its place. And then finally, we have unknown. Hopefully you'll never have to use this one, but this is just a status that you can use if something gets really confusing and somehow it doesn't fit into the previous categories. I've been using this these categories for a few years when I worked at Sacramento Tree Foundation. So I've thought them through pretty well. Hopefully you won't find any situations that don't fit, but if you do, the unknown is there. And the only thing I want to say about that is you should always leave a note about why you used unknown, because by itself, unknown doesn't tell us anything, right? If you were to forget and try to go back and look at that, you would say, what the heck, why is this unknown? I don't know why, unless you left a note that explained it. Looks like Dale, did you have a question?
What about if a tree was misidentified?
Well,
and you want to go back and correct it?
Do you mean like misidentified as in the species was misidentified?
Correct.
Yeah, so you can go back and you can change the species on there, but that wouldn't.
Oh, it's up on the other menu, but not on this one.
Sorry, say that again.
I see. Just go up and change the common name. Does that have anything to do with this particular drop down?
Exactly, yeah. So that's not part of this status field, but yeah, you can change the scientific name if you need to. Okay, so I'm going to move on to a couple of common scenarios where you might want to think about these statuses. So, no, going forward, there we go. Okay, so the most common situation you're going to have is a new planting, right? So this is, you're going out and you're working with your local community, you want to put some trees in. There's kind of two different ways you can go about it. You could start at the proposed tree stage if you want to use TreePlotter to help you plan your project. You can add the trees to the map where you want to put them, and you can put them as set the status to proposed tree. Once you've done that, you're going to move forward with your project and you're going to change those trees over to one of these three statuses. The first is canceled. If the project, if that tree site didn't work out, they don't want to plant it there or something, you can move it to canceled. Plant it alive. Once you've planted it, of course, you would move it to that. Or if it's more of a tree giveaway where you're not actually there for the planting, you can put it as delivered to partner. And again, that's because we want to be aware that those trees probably were planted, but there is a significant fraction of them that might not be. And then otherwise, if you don't want to plan out your project ahead of time on the map, you can also just, jump straight to planted alive or delivered to partner if you want to do it that way too. That's totally fine. Okay. Then we have replacements. So this is a situation again where a tree has died, and you discover it, either someone reports it to you or you go out in the field and you notice it. So your tree might start at planted, standing dead. Again, all these statuses that say planted should only be used, of course, when the tree's actually been planted. So if it's in the pot and it dies, it would not be standing dead, if that makes sense. But planted, standing dead, then it gets cut down. You can move it to planted stump. That can be useful too, to designate, like if you need to grind a stump, that's a good thing you can put on your map if you want to. And then finally, planted removed when it's totally gone. For small trees, a lot of times we're going to skip that step, right? If it's just a little sapling, we don't need to cut it down first. And then once you've removed the tree and planted a new one in its place, you go back to the old tree on the map and you change it to removed and replaced. And then you would create a new tree, add it on top of the old one. And then we can also hide the old tree if it's confusing to see it on the map too. Finally, this is probably the most complicated, and this is where a lot of these statuses are for, but we are trying, again, to encourage people and make it easier for people to go back and check on their trees after they've been planted, which is what we call monitoring. And this is kind of a flow chart for how you would go about filling out the status of the tree when you monitor it. We're going to do a whole separate training on how to monitor and how to record the data from monitoring. So this is just kind of an introduction to it. But when you go to the site and you look for a tree, your first question you're going to ask yourself is, do I know if the tree was planted? If the answer is yes, then you would pick one of these statuses depending on what you find, right? Either the tree is alive, it's dead, it's a stump, or if you know that it was planted but it's not there, you would put removed. If the tree was not planted, right? If you like, I used to work with a residential program a lot. And so we would go to the house and then you'd see that the tree was still there in the pot sometimes. And so that would be a situation where you put never planted, or if you talk to the property manager, or maybe the project manager, whoever, you find out, no, actually that tree didn't end up getting planted, you can move it to never planted. And if you're not sure, because sometimes you just won't be able to get a hold of the people that were there at the time, if it's a few years later, if the answer is maybe, then you're going to put missing. And missing means I conducted a search of where I thought the tree would be. I didn't find it, but I don't know if that's because it died and was removed, or maybe it just never was planted at all. Okay, so hopefully that made some sense. That's pretty complicated stuff, I know. But I just want to do a couple of quick questions to see how well that connected with you guys. So there's a couple scenarios here and I'm going to ask, and we'll do a little poll to see what people think. So first one is, you return to a tree planted several years ago and find that the tree has died back to its roots, but there are new sprouts that have appeared at the base of the tree. Which status should you record for this tree? Go ahead and launch the poll here. Are you guys able to see that poll? Okay, great. Go ahead and click which one you think it is. Okay, so we're getting some results here. So yeah, it looks like most people got it correct, which was the correct answer is standing dead. And this is again because we want to think of the tree as like the above ground portions, because even though those sprouts are alive, they're probably not going to grow into another tree. They probably will need to be removed in most cases. And also, you know, if it's a grafted tree, the other thing is they might not even be the same type of tree if they did grow back. So in most cases, we want to just count that tree as dead and move on. You know, if you did want to try to resuscitate the sprouts, you could do that. But in general, we want to count that one as dead. Okay, let's move on to question 2 here. How do I go to question 2, Megan? Okay, Megan, maybe you can get the question 2 to come up. I'll read this one. A tree is given to a partner for planting. Which status should you record for this tree? Is it A, proposed tree, B, delivered to partner, or C, planted alive? Okay, great. So yeah, the correct answer, which I think everybody got, was delivered to partner. So again, we don't know for sure that the tree was planted. Now, if you, just from the information in this question, the answer is delivered to partner, right? But if again, if they called you or you went to go check on the tree and you saw that it was planted, you could then move it to planted alive once you know that. But the important thing is that if you don't know for sure, we want to kind of stay, you know, uncertain about that in our data as well and put delivered to partner. Okay. Question 3. So next year you return to the same tree that we just talked about in the previous question, but you do not find the tree at the site. Which status should you record for this tree? Right, so this was the hard one, but again, looks like most people got it. The correct answer is missing because we went to the site, we saw that it's not there, but we don't know why it's not there. And so again, that's what the missing status is for. If we don't know for sure if the tree was planted, but we just know that we gave it for this site, it's not there now, we'll put missing. You wouldn't want to put never planted because you know, maybe it was planted, right? Maybe they did, especially if it's, you know, if this is like right after you gave it out, you probably can safely assume that it was never planted. But if it's like years later, you're going to want to put missing because you don't know for sure what happened. And then again, unknown is only just for situations that are, you know, weird kind of edge cases that don't fit into these other categories. So you wouldn't use that in this case, but if you are confused and you want to put unknown, as long as you leave a note, that's okay. And we can correct it later as long as you record what the situation was. Okay. Oh, I didn't share the results. Yeah. All right. Maybe we can briefly pause there. I haven't been monitoring the chat, but do we have any questions? So I see a question about a stolen tree. So if a tree was stolen, I would count it as removed because even though it's not like a traditional removal, right? The tree was still removed from the ground and it's not there anymore. So I'd mark that as removed. And then again, you can add a new tree if you end up replacing it, and then you can mark it as removed and replaced at that point. Okay. So a couple other things I want to go over. You can attach photos to your tree. This is really, really helpful for a lot of reasons. And I highly encourage that anytime you're there physically at the site with the tree, that you take a photo of it. Because even if you spend an hour writing down every little piece of information you could think of about the tree, there's probably still something in that photo that would tell you that you'd learn that you didn't end up writing down, because there's just so much information contained even in one photo. So again, highly recommend take it whenever you have the chance to. It only takes a few seconds. The keys to taking a good tree photograph are, number one, you want to pay attention to the lighting. So I usually try to get the sun to be kind of behind me, or at least not behind the tree, because that makes it really hard to see. Try to kind of frame the tree so that it's filling up most of the whole frame, but also so that it's distinct from its background. So if it's kind of like a really treed area, you want to try to orient yourself so that the tree is distinct. It's not blending in with a bunch of other trees where it's hard to see which is which. You also, if you can, this is sometimes tricky, but it can be helpful to try to make sure there's some kind of recognizable landmark in the background, especially if you're planting a bunch of trees of the same species all together. Sometimes when you come back later, it can be pretty confusing as far as which is which. And having that photo that says, oh, hey, like if I looked at this picture, I'd say, looks like it's lined up right with this one driveway with those, 2 bunches of grasses there. And I might be able to recognize that later and say, okay, this is the right tree. I'll record data on this tree, not the one next to it. There are also situations where you may want to take additional photos. So if the tree has any kind of problem with it, if it's damaged, if it's got a pest, you can take some more detailed photos that show those. Or if you need help identifying the tree, really, really handy to take some close-ups of like the leaves, the flowers, whatever thing is there that it seems like would help identify the tree. You can put them on TreePlotter, and then either I can help you or you can find somebody else at your organization who can help you identify the tree. Okay, so there are a lot of other fields. Unfortunately, we won't have time to go through all of them, but I'm going to go through some important ones I think you guys will want to use. Under the tree tab, we also have archived. This is a checkbox that you can click, and what this will do is hide the tree from view. So in general, I would only use this if you have an impetus that you want to delete a tree, maybe instead archive it, because that preserves the information, but it won't distract you by being on the screen. So basically what this means is I'm done with this tree. I don't really want to see it again. I'm going to archive it. If I ever need to retrieve it, it is possible, but you do want to be cautious about this because once it's archived, it'll probably be easy to forget about. So if you did need to look for it later, it might be hard to find. User expertise. This is one of the required fields, so everyone needs to fill this out. Basically, this is referring to your general level of expertise at both entering the tree data and collecting the tree data. And in general, if those two things are different, let's say you're an expert arborist, but you're new to TreePlotter, you should use the lower level of expertise. So if you are a beginner at TreePlotter, which I think basically everyone here is going to be, then you can click beginner, okay? And then over the next few months, as you get more and more familiar with it, you might decide, hey, I feel ready. I'm an intermediate now. I'm starting to get the hang of things. And then maybe in a few more years, you would consider yourself an expert. Those are the 3 options. And if you are, even if you became an expert at TreePlotter, if you went out one day and you started measuring trunk diameters, but it was the first time you ever did that, then you would put yourself as a beginner again when you put that information in. Next is planted or distributed by our org. This is basically trying to get at, is this a tree that we've planted or planned or we're heavily involved in getting in the ground in some way? Or is it a tree that we're just tracking for some other reason? So it could be that you're looking for a specific pest in your community and you're collecting data on all the mature oak trees. You weren't involved in the planting. You can put no for that. Otherwise, if you did plant it or you were involved, you put yes. Next, we have stock type. This is pretty self-explanatory, but you're just going to choose the size of the tree when you put it in the ground. If you don't know, you can put unknown. Date distributed and date planted. This is one that we were getting questions on earlier. The date distributed is going to be if you don't know the date planted. So this is kind of like what we were talking about earlier with status. Excuse me. You would put the date distributed instead if you gave it away, but you don't actually know when it was planted. So it's kind of an alternative to the date planted. If you know the date planted, just put that. If you don't, but you do know the date distributed, you can use that instead. And I'm really sorry, but I'm actually feeling very lightheaded. So I'm going to take a brief break. And maybe if anyone has any questions for Megan or anyone else, they can ask them and I'll be right back.
Okay. Let's see here. Does anybody have any questions so far about any of the fields? I wanted to let you know that Alex has put together a really great guidebook with definitions. And I'm going to put that in the chat right now. It's the Network Tree Inventory Program User's Guide. And so we've gone over like what every of these, all these custom fields, and you might forget and can't remember what cancel means, for instance. You can go in to use this guide, and Alex is going to be working to, this is a live document, it's in a Google document, so you'll be able to view it, but in real time, he'll be updating this with additional information and helpful tools going forward. So I wanted to make sure you are all aware of that. And for all of you, has everybody visited our Network Tree Inventory webpage yet? If you haven't, I'm going to put that in the chat again for you. This is like your one-stop shop for everything that you might need to know about the Network Tree Inventory program. So it has the direct link to our TreePlotter page where you can see all of our network member organizations that are participating in the program. It has information about various uses and reasons why folks should have a tree inventory program. And then we have all of our recorded webinars and our future training opportunities that you can register for on the page. So Alex mentioned sandbox tutorial trainings. So if you scroll down to the midsection of the website, you can actually click the registration links for the date and time that works best for you. And then we'll add more dates in that location in the future. Today, after our webinar, we're going to have the recording available as a link to our YouTube page as well, so that you can have this. I'll send you an email, but it'll also exist on this website, so you don't have to worry about losing the link in your email inbox. I know if you're like me, you get like 40 emails in a day, and it can get easily lost. So it'll always be on this website page. And then at the bottom, if you scroll down to the very bottom, we have some other really helpful tools. One of them is the user guide. You have a direct link to the user guide I just put in the chat. There's a great resource. The USDA Forest Service has an urban tree monitoring field guide. So in the future, if you want to go back to your trees and do tree monitoring and gather data about the tree health of your tree, this is a really great resource about helpful tips and tools about doing some of those things. Alex will also be providing a webinar in the future about tree monitoring specifically, but this guide is really helpful if you wanted to get a jump start and learn more about some best practices in doing tree monitoring. And then Maggie, earlier in this program, provided a great resource, and she kind of went over the basics of how to access the filters, for instance, or the hub, all those great things. And she mentioned that there is a TreePlotter support page. That link is also on the bottom of our California ReLeaf tree inventory page. So if you can't remember what it is, you can always know that it's going to be on our website, and you can have a direct link there. We'll update this as needed. And I also wanted to go over some other opportunities that are in-person trainings. So sometimes virtual trainings are really great, but if you want hands-on in-person training where Alex can help you use a tablet or work on using your TreePlotter account in real time with a laptop in front of you both, we have 2 in-person trainings coming up. One is in Northern California. It's going to be on April 8th in Sacramento at the California Endowment Center. And you can register or RSVP to attend. The link is on that on the California ReLeaf Tree Inventory page website. The other upcoming date is in Southern California. It's going to be in Los Angeles the day before our network retreat. And so I hope everyone here will come to the network retreat, which is going to be on Friday, May 10th. At the California Endowment Center in Los Angeles, which is right near Union Station in downtown LA. But if you want to come the day before and get hands-on training and do TreePlotter, it's like a 2-for-1 situation. So we'll hope you consider doing that, and that would be on May 9th. So Alex, I'll turn it back over to you. I just explained some of the things that we have available on our website, including resources and registration links, as well as our upcoming training dates for in-person. So I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thank you. Sorry about that. I'm still getting over being sick a little bit, and I guess caught caught up with me for a minute there, but we'll keep going. Okay, so let's see. Date distributed and date planted. Hopefully that made sense. The next field I wanted to talk about was QA needs. QA stands for quality assurance, and this is a way to flag a tree that needs additional help. You can either use this. I will try to check these depending on how much time I have. I can't guarantee that I will see all of them, but you can flag it that it needs help with something. You can choose either data mapping, identification if you need help identifying the tree, or with tree health. If there's something wrong with the tree, we can take a look at it, especially if you take good pictures and help. But you guys, as kind of most of you, a lot of you, I think, are leaders at your organization, you can also use this tool as you're training additional users. If they have a problem out in the field or something, they can flag the tree using this field, and then you'll be able to, back on your computer or wherever, you can filter down to the trees that have QA needs, and then you can take a look at them. Highly recommend that for anyone who uses this field, they also leave a note. There's a notes field. You can type in whatever information to explain, what's going on with the tree, because just knowing that there's a problem is not enough on its own. You also need to know what the problem is. And then finally, we have the tree map caption. This is a useful feature I want to point out for people. Under the hub, there is a section called map tools. And if you go in there, you can turn on labels. And what this does is it makes a little piece of text appear next to each dot for the tree if you want to label them. And you can choose a different field that you want the text to appear as. So you could label them by species name, or you could label them by, diameter, or whatever piece of information you want. Or if you want to create sort of like a custom visualization, like let's say I want to say, oh, this tree is really close to this pipe. Make sure that you place it carefully so that it's 5 feet away or something like that. You could type that information in that you want to appear on the screen in this tree map caption field. And then when you turn on the label and select tree map caption, it will display that on the screen, which is really useful if you want to create a printout to share with your planting leaders on your event day or something like that. So hopefully that makes sense. You might want to go in there and play around with it a little bit, and that'll make it clearer, I think. Okay, so the next tab over from tree is the location field, like we saw earlier with Maggie. We have location accuracy. This is an important field, again, if you're doing some kind of tree distribution project or any tree where you're not there and not present for the planting. You can select that the accuracy level is parcel. So there's two options. There's point, which means we know the exact point where the tree is, or parcel. That means we know the address that the tree is at, but we don't know the exact location. So I recommend marking that, especially if you're going to go back. It can be really handy to know, okay, yes, I know exactly where this tree is. So if it's not there, something's happened to it, right? Versus, I think I know generally where this tree is. It's somewhere around here, right? You would label that as parcel, and then you can know, okay, I actually have to hunt for this tree because maybe it's planted, on the other side of the park or something, who knows. Address, kind of talked about this earlier. This should automatically fill, but I recommend double checking it because it's not 100% accurate, and you can modify it manually if you need to. Row space refers to the amount of space around the tree. So this would be like if it's a sidewalk cutout or a median, basically it's referring to the amount of space that the tree's roots have to grow. Some of you might recognize this from the CAL FIRE MDCA if you've ever used that. This has the same options as that. And if you're not familiar with that, don't worry about it too much. Then we also have land use. This is referring to basically the type of property that the tree is planted on. So it could be in a park, it could be at a school, it could be, an abandoned lot, it could be a residential neighborhood. You can put that information there if you wish to. And then planting site is kind of similar to grow space, but it's referring to, what's immediately around the tree, not the broader context, but is this tree in a grass lawn? Is it in a garden of some kind? Is it in a wild area with just, whatever wild plants are all around it, that kind of thing. Okay, so the next tab over is the project tab. There's a few different things on here, but I wanted to bring up the funder field. This is where you can track who is funding your tree, and you can also select multiple funders if there are multiple funders. This one's actually not working quite yet. We had a unexpected hiccup, but it will be fixed soon. So if you play around with it right now, it's just going to be blank, but eventually it's going to be a drop-down menu. You can select multiple options from the drop-down menu, and then you'll also be able to, we'll be able to edit what list of funders is on there. So if you need to track a certain funder and it's not on the list, you can contact me and I'll add it to the list. But we should have the most common ones on there. And then planting event name and planting project name. I had Maggie show you that a little bit earlier. Hopefully that made sense. But basically the planting event is, a group of trees that you're planting all together on one day. And then the project is meant to be sort of like a larger initiative that might have multiple events in it, right? So you might have a planting push that's in a certain neighborhood or something like that. And if you're coming back to plant in multiple schools or multiple parks over multiple days, you can collect all those planting events and kind of put them in one project if you want to. It could also represent a grant. So for example, if you have a CAL FIRE grant that goes for a certain area for certain years, you can label all the trees that they are under that grant. And that's why those things are also connected to like a grant ID, which is a number that would be given to you by your funder. Or the grant year, which would be the year of the grant. Okay, let's see how much time. We don't have much time left. So I will briefly talk about tree identification. Most of the time, you're just going to read the identity from the label that the nursery gives to you, and hopefully that's correct. I do want to mention that sometimes the label on the tree is not right, so it's not a bad idea to double check. Or if it looks weird or something, you can, seek some expert input. I'm happy to help with that too. But we do want to try as best as we can to identify trees, especially identify them correctly, especially if you're going to be adding trees that you didn't plant. That can get a lot more confusing, right? Because you just know the tree's there in the world. You think maybe it's this, but maybe it's actually that, who knows? So just keep in mind your own level of expertise. ID apps, if you do use them, I would think of them as a tool, not like a truth teller, because they're often wrong. They can generate a list of suggestions and they can be very, very helpful for that. But you don't want to just take your app and say, okay, it says it's a, Siberian oak. I guess that's what it is, right? If there is uncertainty and you're adding a tree, you do have the option to just select the genus. So for example, if you know that it's an oak, but you can't tell which type of oak it is, you can always just put it's an oak, right? That's fine. And then if you're not even sure that the genus, that's fine too. You can put other or unknown species. That's totally fine. And then if that happens, you can also take some good photos of it. Like I said, a couple close-ups of the different features, add those on TreePlotter. And then if you put QA needs, you can mark it as it needs identification help. And then I'll try to look through and check on those, and maybe I can help you identify some of them if you have good pictures. If you don't have good pictures, then it's going to be hard. And then you can also email me if you need help as well, if I don't notice it. Okay, and then we'll probably just skip over this stuff. These are just a couple of different types of trees in the California urban forest that are commonly misidentified. So mulberries, oaks, she oaks, a lot of people have trouble with these. Araucarias or Norfolk Island pine. This in particular is one that the nurseries often mislabel, actually. So just keep in mind with these trees that they're difficult to identify. It's okay to put, that you're uncertain. I'd rather have that than have like the wrong identity. And then briefly, I wanted to kind of touch on some of the other features, which we're not going to cover in this training, because I think, after a certain point, we could tie you to a chair and keep you here all week and train you until you're a master, but I don't know how fun or helpful that would be. So instead, we're going to kind of break it up. This was the basics, and then we'll do some other trainings on things in the future. So there's also a tab called Care and Health. This is where when you go back and you check on your trees, you can record any information on how they're doing. You can also record if they need certain interventions, like if a tree needs to be watered or weeded or pruned, you can record that here. And then there's also a feature called work records, and this is a record of some work that can be done on the tree, and it could be a future or a past record. So the word record kind of implies past, but you can also assign a work record to another user and tell them, hey, you need to go water this tree because it's really thirsty or something like that. There is a history tab. This is where you can see work records that have been completed. You can see past inspections, which an inspection, we didn't cover that today, but that's kind of like a little snapshot of the tree. So if you take an inspection, you fill out all the same information that's on the tree, but it sort of freezes it in time. Then you can take multiple inspections over time and still have access to each of those snapshots. But the history tab will have those, and it also has a record of all the changes that you've made to the tree over time. So if, for example, like the previous question we had, if the tree was misidentified and you changed the species at some point, it'll say, you know, so-and-so changed the species to this on this date. So that can be really helpful if you ever get confused about something, or you just want to look at, you know, how did the tree grow over time? Here's how big it was at this time. Here's how big it was now. And then finally, there are lots of tools under the hub, under data tools. You can also click on the data table. If you'd rather see your trees in a table form, you don't have to export it to do that. You can also look at it in TreePlotter. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with TreePlotter. I recommend just starting with the basics and kind of exploring. You can get as deep into it as you want to, really. But you can also just stick with the basics forever and just say, okay, I'm going to add one tree at a time and mark that it's alive, and that's it, right? So it's kind of up to you guys. If you start poking around and you see a feature that you're curious about, let me know, because we're going to do further trainings on some of these more advanced topics, and hearing from you guys what you're interested in learning about would be helpful. So really quickly to wrap up here, there's a tree inventory users guide that we're kind of developing over time. So if you click on that link, you'll see some of the definitions of the fields that I covered here today. And I'll be adding more over time. We also have the TreePlotter support site, which Maggie linked earlier, but I want to remind you of it because that's really your best resource at this point if you want to kind of do some self-guided learning. Click around and check out all the different pages there, or if there's a specific thing you want to do, you can search for it. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Again, I'm here to help you. I'm happy to spend time with you one-on-one if needed, if you have a particular project that's unique, or if you just got lost today, and you know this is a lot, I know. So definitely happy to help with anything. And then finally, we are doing these sandbox trainings. You can kind of think of them as kind of like my virtual office hours. So if you go to the tree inventory page on our website, and you can sign up for those. Again, that's capped at 5 people. So if you do want to participate in those, go ahead and sign up on there, and I will be around there. Of course, you can always call or email me any other time too, but I figured it might be helpful to have a date to look at and remind you that if you want to do this, it's available to you. And there's my contact information. If you need to reach me at any time, go ahead and send me an email, give me a call. Either way, happy to talk about any issues that you might have. It's a complicated piece of software, I know. The basics hopefully are manageable, but you know, you're gonna have questions, and that's totally fine. So and with that, I think we're slightly over here. So I did want to give everybody the opportunity, if you need to head out, go ahead and take off. But otherwise, I'm here and I'll answer any remaining questions until people are tired of it.
I also wanted to say that following today's call, I will be sending out a link recording to this webinar. And all the links that I put in the chat today will also be included in that email. It'll likely be tomorrow. So it'll take me some time to get our video edited and up. But I want to emphasize that it's our California ReLeaf website has all the links that you probably need. So if you just go on our website under network, the drop down option for tree inventory program, you'll always be able to find these things. So I did see one question in the chat, Alex, and then we can have people either raise their hand or put it in the chat and we can take questions. The question was about whether or not under the tree monitoring and tree health stuff, if you use standard American measurements or the metric system.
Great question. Yeah, so I think the units should be specified on there. Hopefully I got that set up so it'll be clear, but in general, I like metric better, but I think people are more familiar with imperial measurements. So we're gonna stick with that just because it's a little easier. And most of the tools that you'll have probably will be in imperial measurements. So imperial again means inches, feet, that kind of thing. I did see a couple other questions in the chat as well. We had, what is choose an add method in add tree? So I think this is probably referring to Maggie's part of the training earlier, which is when you click add a tree in TreePlotter, it's going to come up with a little box that says choose an add method either by map or by GPS, which I know is a little confusing because it's not totally clear how those are different. If you click by map, that's what Maggie was showing you earlier. Then it'll give you the little blue dot and you can click, you can place the tree wherever you want to, visually looking at the map, right? If you choose by GPS, it's going to read automatically the location from your device and put the tree wherever it thinks you are. In general, I don't recommend using that feature unless you absolutely have to. Like if you're in the middle of a totally featureless field and you have no landmarks to place the trees manually, then you could try using the GPS, but it's not very accurate. And so you're going to find that your tree points are going to wander a little bit all over the place and it'll be kind of confusing to see where they are.
I have asked the question and the little box is empty. Is it somewhere else? The add method box doesn't have any choices.
So are you talking about when you press the add button, this is what's happening?
Yes. Yes. And then that little box comes up, choose an add method, and then it's empty. That's why I was confused. Or where?
Interesting. Maybe if you can send me a screenshot of what you're seeing. I'm not sure I've ever encountered that. So when I click on add, it says choose an add method, and then I can click by map or by GPS. So that's what should be happening. Maybe it's glitched somehow. I don't know. I can't explain it. But if you send me a screenshot, maybe I can try to figure it out.
Or maybe I don't know how to take a screenshot on my laptop, but
Okay.
I drew on my phone.
Yeah, you could take a picture too with your phone. That's another way if you can't have that happen where if the something's so frozen that you can't even get it to do anything, right? You might need to take a picture.
Yeah, and maybe during a tutorial or if you may need it, Alex and you can work on maybe even sharing your screen in a future opportunity so he can see in lifetime what's happening.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so I'm just looking through. I don't see any other questions in the chat. So yeah, if anyone else has anything that they're wondering, you can raise your hand or jump in either way. Yeah, and thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate you spending the time to try to learn this. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, think on it, digest. I'm sure there will be questions later on, especially when you try to start doing things. And just keep in mind that you'll want to reach out to me and like I said, sign up for those not one-on-one, but small group sessions if that sounds appealing, because I think that'll be handy for some people. And it'll be fun, I hope. Alrighty, well, thanks everyone so much for coming, and it's good to see you guys. And yeah, we'll talk later.